So I've got 6:30 right now. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got a quorum. Do we have Councilmember Treen on?
Yes, he
there he
just rejoined.
Okay. The mayor called me late this evening and said that she was not able to be at the meeting. So I'm going to start the meeting at least until she can jump on. So Lita, are you guys ready on your end?
Yes, we're ready.
Great. Then I am going to call the City Council regular meeting for Tuesday, September 7th, 2021 to order. Meeting accessibility. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-28, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual City Council meetings this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public, and public comment is also able to be submitted. Please note, we are using Zoom this evening. This is an alteration from our previous platform that we're using. So any hiccups, please give us at least a little latitude this evening as we embark on this new platform. So that leads the public to join us in a different way as well on the web via Zoom. And in the packet, you'll find that link. By phone, which you would dial 253-215-8782 and enter the webinar ID when prompted, which is 977-4347-6957, and then the pound sign. To view live, you can watch on TV 21 on the city's website as well, and on YouTube on the City of Sammamish's YouTube channel. You can view those later on those same venues. Roll call. Madam City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Karen Moran. Deputy Mayor Christy Malchow.
Present.
Councilmember Ken Gamblin.
Present.
Councilmember Tom O'Dell.
Present.
Councilmember Chris Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Here.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. We do have a quorum. The Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Gamblin, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Certainly. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Gamblin. I'd entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? And for council members, you'll need to use the raise your hand feature. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, the approval of our agenda. Okay, public comment. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 2028, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual City Council meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public, and the public comment is able to be submitted. Written comment needs to be in by 5 p.m. the day of the meeting. You would email those to our city clerk at lhashi@sammamish.us and the city council at citycouncil@sammamish.us. Madam City Clerk, do we have people in the queue for comment before I go into?
I'd like to ask any attendees to raise their hand if they would like to speak.
It looks like there's a couple popping up over there.
Yeah.
So for those that are wanting to give public comment via Zoom this evening, you're obviously figuring out, I see at least 2 hands that are raised. You will be given up to 3 minutes of verbal public comment may be provided in person during the meeting. The city clerk will ask attendees to raise their hand as you've done. And then when it's your turn to speak, the clerk will unmute you and you'll be given the ability to turn on your web camera if you desire. You will be notified when you have 15 seconds remaining to wrap up your comments, after which you will be muted at the end of the 3-minute comment period. As a note, please be courteous and respectful to everyone when making your public comments. If you would like to submit visuals like PowerPoints related to your comment, those do need to be done prior to the meeting by 5 p.m. And those are described into the written comment, and your materials will be sent to the full City Council. So, Madam City Clerk, do you want to call on them, or would you like me to, since I can see?
Well, I was just going to read, I think you've managed to, I have a list of things that they need to do. I see
Okay.
that we have 2 people who called in and raised their hands.
Yep.
And I will unmute the callers in the order that they have their hands raised. When it is your turn, I will convert you to a panelist so you can be unmuted and turn on your web camera. Then you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please note, during this conversion, it will feel like you have been removed from the meeting. Please wait a few seconds and you will return as a panelist. I would now unmute the first caller.
Lita, is that Mary Wichter? That's who I see first.
Yes, that's who I'm
Okay, perfect.
converting.
Mary, are you there?
Mary, are you there?
It sure did look like it took me off the thing, so thanks for telling me that ahead. I was like, I hit the wrong button. So I hope you can hear me. I see that you have 2 stormwater things tonight. So my name is Mary Wichter, and I've been in the city of Sammamish for over 20 years. The first one you have is for the stormwater code amendments. It's just an administrative change. Basically, if you have a project and you need to do a drainage review, if you think that you know what you're doing, and then as you get down the road, you go, oh, I need to change it. So I need to do, it's not called a deviation or a variance in stormwater, it's called an adjustment. If you need to do an adjustment, that is currently a type 1 administrative change, which means I believe the Director of Public Works or the Community Development Director, David File, can go ahead and agree to that change. So if you live below that, they might make a change and you don't get to really say anything about it. You might not even be noticed. Like where I live in Tamarack. There is no noticing for anything in a landslide hazard area, although there are for erosion hazard, which do not appear above me. So what'll happen is they'll make the change. And then if you don't like it, when the permit is finalized, then you have 21 days to do a land use petition act, which is called a LUPA, and you end up in front of the Superior Court. So you have to all of a sudden get an attorney and all that, which is just crazy. So what they're trying to do is for more flexibility for both ends of the spectrum and to keep what the city's doing transparent, they're changing it from a type 1 to a type 2. And that's where I believe the city does make the either advice or they make the decision and then it's appealable to the hearing examiner, which is a lot better. It just increases transparency for everybody. So if the person who gives input, they have a chance to do that and there'll be official public hearing. Or with a type 1, they might take my input, but they don't have to use it. And then it also gives the person who is doing the drainage adjustment the chance that they could appeal it if they don't like the city's decision. So I think that's really good. They did update it. Originally, you guys were going to do it for every thing, which I think is fine. I think anybody that's doing that, if you get down and find out your drainage isn't going to work, I think you should have to do it. But they've just written it for large and full drainage reviews. And they also added critical drainage areas because you need, if you are doing a big complex project, you have more impacts. And if you're in a critical drainage area, you have steep slopes and other things, and you need to think about that. So that was a change that the planning submission supported. And then on the second topic of the stormwater rate study, you've done it before. You did raise rates in the past. Because of that, instead of $3 or $4 million a year, I believe we get $7 or $8 million in stormwater fees. The stormwater can only be used for stormwater things. I think you do need to look at it again. And I would certainly hope that where you have flooding and you have complaints that you would help resolve those issues because you're supposed to be proactive, just not responsive in emergencies for all the public input in 2016 and afterwards.
15 seconds.
Also for the stormwater rate study, you need to be able to do the capital improvement projects that you study in basin plans and you prioritize. Those need to get done. So I hope that you will go for both of those. And that's my 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Lita, do you?
We just lost sound.
Yeah, we just the deputy mayor's logging back in.
There we go. Yeah, it said reconnecting suddenly.
Okay.
So I see Paul Stickney next.
Hello, Paul. Are you there, Paul?
Yep, I'm here. Hello, city council members. Paul Stickney here. I sent in a couple emails today, and I'm only going to ad lib on them because they do speak for themselves. On one of them, it was in regards to spending $250,000 on the attorney contract and questioning the need relative to the Growth Management Hearings Board. I was a little surprised myself when I went in and checked at the end of August and found that both of the GMHB cases had been closed. They're over with as far as the GMHB is concerned. And I knew the city had one appeal against Jaron going, and heard that there was another appeal by the city against Jaron, STCA, and Sunny Oak. But I see that the city is moving forward, attempting to consolidate the cases and move them to the Court of Appeals. And the question I had is, what's the reasoning for that when the two cases have been closed with the GMHB? And shouldn't those just be dropped and save the funding? The second thing is, I was happy that the Sammamish Facebook page put out the BLUMA EIS on August the 26th, but I did notice that public commenting on the social media page for the city's Facebook was turned off. Sent an email string back and forth. Haven't gotten a good satisfactory answer as to why it's turned off on that post, where other similar like-kind things that have both a formal place for comments and allow social media are allowed. And I went ahead and looked, and for 6 months, there were 450 posts on our city's Facebook page, and all of them, except for this one, allowed commenting. And this is probably the most significant thing that has happened in Sammamish for 20 years, a comprehensive change to EIS where virtually everything in the comp plan and the background is on the table. So I would highly advise that you get as much public input as possible and allow both formal comments on the EIS and social media comments on the city's Facebook page. That is my comment for this evening.
Thanks, Paul. Mr. City Manager, maybe you can circulate an answer to council relative to Mr. Stickney's question on that particular post and why public comment wasn't allowed on that one.
I'll work on a formal response back, but generally speaking, on social media for this type of thing, are we responding to the initial post? Are we responding to the response to the initial post or the response to the response? Staff has said that it's unwieldy and very time consuming to chase those down, and we use Connect Sammamish, which is for this type of commentary, and it's easier for us to track. It's consolidated in one place, and we've been using that as the common tool, and we don't want to move off of that track.
Okay. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I would just like more follow-up on that, because it's very interesting that for the last 6 months, all 450 posts that have been out there have all allowed comments, and similar types of information where we've requested public input have all allowed comments on the Facebook page. So it seems very unusual that this is the only one that we're turning the comments
Point
off.
of order, please. Point of order.
State your point.
I was not aware that council was allowed to comment on public comments. If we are, then we should announce that and make some rules on how we do that.
I was responding to the city manager's comments. I wasn't commenting on public comment.
Yeah, I don't, Councilmember Gamlin, I don't know that there's a rule that we can't ask questions when a resident brings stuff up.
So I just want to, again, I'm not making it about anything in particular. It's more about transparency and engagement. And it does seem odd that this is the only thing that we've turned comments off. There's no rule that we have to respond to all the comments when people comment, but it is a great way to be able to collect information from the public. And it just seems like we're being less than transparent by turning it off just on this one particular item. So it would be good to get more information.
Deputy Mayor and Council, I'll get a more formal response, but in fact, it's my understanding that we do have to respond to every comment because it is not just a debatable issue, it's just not asking for input, but it is a document that requires a response to every inquiry. And so I don't want to debate it anymore. Others more qualified will be capable of helping me put together an answer, and we'll get back to the council.
Mr. City Manager, might I make a quick suggestion? I understand the city's position on that and needing to respond and or collect all of the comments in a singular place. That makes sense. Maybe we can update the post itself by stating that so that people understand why commenting is not on for that post.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. I think we have staff listening that will do the same thing, and we'll take that as a good idea.
Good. Thank you. Lita, can you just confirm that we don't have anyone else for public comment before we close it?
I do not see any more hands raised.
Perfect. Okay. So for the public, the council does have an executive session, and this is litigation and potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)I. Mr. City Manager, do you have a time estimate on this? Hour?
Difficult to say. I think if we had an hour, that should be more than adequate.
Okay. So for the public, we will try to be back here at 7:45, or we will extend that executive session. So council, you have a separate link that you need to use to access the executive session.
Could I please ask it, anybody in the executive session, please exit out of Zoom? Thank you. Okay, yeah, I think he's good now. Thank you.
We're good to go?
Yes.
Very good. So for the general public who is watching, the council does need to extend our executive session. We will now be in executive session until 8:45 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Deputy Mayor, we can't hear you. You're very, very quiet. It's very, maybe turn your volume up. You can hear her fine?
Okay, as long as council can hear me, I think that's a good thing.
Okay, we're good now.
Okay, good. All right. All right. Councilmember Stewart, you said you were removing an item, but I didn't hear which one. So if you could repeat that, that would be helpful.
Sure. Item number 8, please.
Okay. 8. Are there any items from consent that we need to pull in addition to 8? Okay, then I would entertain a motion for passing the consent calendar minus item 8, which I will tuck under unfinished business.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. All right. Moving on. Our first presentation, or we have a proclamation, excuse me, for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Councilmember Stewart, would you mind reading that?
I would be happy to.
Thank you.
Proclamation, Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas each year in the United States, more than 15,780 children from birth to 19 years old are diagnosed with cancer, equal to about 42 childhood cancer diagnoses each day. And whereas approximately 1 in 285 children in the United States will be diagnosed with cancer before their 20th birthday, with this number increasing each year. And whereas each year worldwide, there are more than 300,000 new childhood cancer diagnoses, equal to about every 3 minutes, a family will hear the words, "Your child has cancer." And whereas, although the 5-year survival rate for childhood cancers has reached 84%, nearly 1,500 American children under the age of 19 still die each year from cancer, making it the leading killer of children by disease. And whereas 2/3 that do survive will face at least one chronic health condition later on in life, not limited to, but including heart, liver, and lung damage, infertility, secondary cancers, and growth deficits. And whereas the causes of childhood cancer are largely unknown, and more studies are needed to understand which treatments work best for children. And whereas cancer treatment for children often must differ from traditional adult treatments to take into account children's developmental needs and other factors. And whereas hundreds of children are being treated for cancer in Washington State, with locations at Seattle Children's Hospital in Seattle, Mary Bridge Hospital in Tacoma, and Shriners Hospital for Children in Spokane. And whereas Washington is a caring state and has community that supports children and families, now therefore be it resolved that the Sammamish City Council do hereby proclaim September 2021 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month.
Thank you, Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you.
We do have a second proclamation, and that is Welcoming Week, which is September 10th through the 19th. Councilmember Odell, would you read that one, please?
Sure.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Odell, before you start, if everyone else will mute, because we do get some feedback, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing to remember. Thank you, Ben. Okay, Welcoming Week, Sammamish, Washington proclamation. Welcoming Week, September 10th through 17, 2021. Whereas Sammamish is home to people of all backgrounds, including those who were not born here, but now call it home, Sammamish success depends on making sure that all residents feel welcome. New residents are a vital part of our community, along with our longtime residents, bringing ideas, starting businesses, serving in civic roles, working in critical industries, and contributing to the vibrant diversity that we value. We capitalize on diversity as an asset. Our community must strive to create a culture and policies that ensure everyone can belong and thrive. That includes addressing disparities, countering hate, understanding history, and helping neighbors come together. Our community has faced structures, systems, and policies that discriminate against residents who were born in another country, are Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ, and other identities. Whereas disparities in life outcomes exist along these lines and others in Sammamish. While those mostly directly impacted are residents who are discriminated against, whose life outcomes are on average more adverse with those identities, all of our residents are adversely affected. Anti-Blackness, racism, xenophobia, and all forms of other threatening our collective well-being, health, and prosperity. Whereas regardless of where we are born or how we identify, we are all residents of Sammamish and our lives are interdependent. It is time to come together and build communities where every resident has the opportunity to thrive and contribute. By fostering a welcoming environment for all, regardless of immigration status, race, ethnicity, place of origin, English language proficiency, religion, income, gender, sexual orientation, differing abilities, age, and other factors, we embrace Sammamish's health, economic prosperity, and well-being for current and future generations. Now and therefore, on behalf of the City Council, we proclaim the week of September 10 to 17 Welcoming Week and call on all of our residents to reach across lines of difference and participate in one of the Welcoming Week events across Washington. I also call on business leaders, civic groups, government agencies, and community institutions to undertake their own initiatives along with Sammamish's beyond Welcoming Week to make the region a more welcoming place for new and long-term residents alike. And Deputy Mayor, I'd like to say one thing. I entered the United States as an immigrant at age 12. So this is particularly meaningful to me.
Thank you, Councilmember Odell. Okay, so we are going to go back to item number 8, which was pulled from consent. That is the contract amendment for attorney services, Eglick and Whitehead. Councilmember Stewart, you pulled that, so I'll turn this over to you.
Great, thank you. I have one big question, and that is that there's a comment in the agenda packet that says that as of this writing, we've only spent 25% of our litigation budget. And I was wondering if we could get the math behind that, because I'm not sure that my numbers add up to that. So if we could get that and share that with the public, that would be awesome. Just on principle, I'm just concerned that yet another $250,000 on legal fees is not the best way for us to spend our taxpayer dollars. I think that, you know, if you look through the agenda packet, we've spent 50,000 here, another 100,000 there, another 200,000 there, and now another $250,000. And at some point, we need to be investing in our infrastructure. We need to be investing in climate action plans, right? We've been told on multiple occasions that we don't have the resources to work on sustainability and climate action plans. And I just question if another $250,000 spent on attorney's fees is really what is in the best interest of our community and the best way for us to spend tax dollars.
I don't know if staff has answers for Councilmember Stewart's questions now, or if they need to circle back. Mr. City Manager.
No, I cannot produce the manner in which the 25% has been expended to date, and we'll have to bring that back to you.
Okay, Councilmember Odell.
Thank you. It's a lot of money. And I agree, there are a whole bunch of priorities out there that are probably not as adequately funded as they might be. However, we effectively tonight had a discussion which says that if we don't do this, approve this, it will send a very bad message to somebody that we would not want to get that message. We don't have to spend all 250,000. We are only authorizing up to that much. We can work with the city manager to make sure that this expenditure is monitored. And at some point, if the council feels differently, we can cut it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Odell. Councilmember Gamblin.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So first point Councilmember Odell made, we're not asking to spend that money, we're asking to have it available. Second thing that I think should be brought up here is the reason this expenditure is looking to be approved is not casual. It's to respond, to be able to respond to actions that are taken against the city. The only way that residents can push back and the city can push back against people who don't have the best interests of the city at heart is frequently by litigating. And when we approve fees for our attorneys to push back and advocate to the best interest of the residents, that's a statement by the council that we are willing to stand up and spend the money necessary to create the city that the residents are asking us to create. Thank you.
Councilmember Trine.
Yeah, I make a motion to direct the city manager to enter into a PSA with Eglet and Whited in the amount not to exceed $250,000 for continued legal representation in the Jaron versus Sammamish and the STCA versus Sammamish, and for the provision of legal advice regarding the Growth Management Act.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I've heard several council members say we don't necessarily need that much money. Then I say we don't approve that much money. If we don't think we need that much, then let's approve it in smaller increments and continue to have this discussion so we are sure that the appropriate oversight is applied. $250,000 is a lot of money in one chunk. So I would make a motion to amend and say that we approve $75,000 now, as opposed to 250, and it can continue to come back and we can approve it in chunks.
Okay, don't have a second on the amendment. Councilmember, our city manager has got his hand up, so I'm gonna ask him to speak here.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's important that this amount go through because we have to pay existing bills as well as look going forward. And I don't have that off the tip of my tongue here about how to dissect it, but we wouldn't ask for what we didn't think we immediately need and then moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, so I have a question on that. So are you saying, Mr. City Manager, that we spent funds that we did not already have allocated and approved? And that's why we have to approve this amount?
You were dark in the month of August, and we have bills coming in that amounted to, in part, what we're asking for.
But wouldn't we have had to have approved the work to be done knowing what that bill would have come to? And we already had a not to exceed amount that we then went and exceeded?
Well, I don't have the bills right before me. Lisa, I look to you to help me out here. But you're right in the middle of legal actions, and your legal counsel moved forward to handle a number of things pending the fact that they'll get paid.
Well, I just have grave concerns that we had not to exceed amounts and we exceeded those. And now you're asking retroactive.
We did not exceed those amounts. We were not billed for STCA in July yet. There's about a 60-day lag. We will receive those bills sometime this week, knowing that Eglet and Whited were getting up to the ceiling of that amount on the STCA litigation line. They consulted with me and said, we don't know what the bills are going to be, but we expect them to be about this amount. And if you go back to the agenda bill, I say in one sentence, as of this writing, we have this much left on the contract. We haven't been billed the new amount, but we expect to be. So nothing nefarious was going on. In fact, we were working proactively to make sure we didn't exceed the existing contracts.
But I mean, if we had a road construction project, for example, right, we would not authorize the work to be done unless we had those funds already approved. That's, you know, that's what those not to exceed clauses mean, is that you don't approve the work ahead of time if you don't have those funds approved. So I get that we haven't received the bills, that the bills are lagging, but someone approved that work to be done before getting the funds approved.
No one knew what STCA was going to cost until it was behind us.
Right, it wasn't a public works project where you can have not to exceeds and have quantities of work measured by per foot or by ton.
I didn't ask Peter and Josh to give me an accounting at the end of each day as to how many hours they were going to bill us for that day.
Councilmember Odell?
I would like to make a request to the city manager that he provide a reconciliation of all this to the council prior to the next meeting.
Could you restate that for me?
I'd like to ask, Dave, I'd like to ask that you provide the council with a reconciliation of budget and expense issues in this regard prior to the next council meeting.
Certainly, we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have any more hands up. I have a motion on the floor. Councilmember Stewart just got her hand back up. Councilmember Stewart, one last time.
Can we get a reconciliation before we approve another $250,000? I feel like we're writing blank checks here, and that is irresponsible of us as a council.
I think we've heard from our attorney and our city manager that stated they cannot produce that this evening, and because there is a motion on the floor, you reserve the right to vote no. So, Councilmember Gamblin.
Yeah, I just want to mention that in a highly dynamic legal environment where there's ongoing litigation of an unknown nature, I would fully expect our city manager and our legal team to do whatever was necessary in that environment to represent the city's interests correctly.
Okay, I don't have any more hands up, so the motion on the floor is to approve this contract. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, by a vote of 5-1, the ayes have it. Motion passes. Okay, we'll get back on track with our agenda here. Item number 15 is a presentation on the Stormwater Code amendments. Mr. City Manager. Mr. City Manager. Dave?
I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor. Would you restate that? I was writing some notes down.
We're moving on to the next item, which is item 15. So that's the Stormwater Code amendments. I was just turning it over to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. David, can you want to speak to that? Are you going to handle that, or is Jeff?
Sorry about that. I had to join as a panelist. I was just given access, so it took a minute for me to get into the system.
You are now a panelist. Yes.
Yes. So, again, apologize for that. With us tonight, we have Lindsay Oswald, who is a project manager in the Department of Community Development, who will be presenting to the council. We also have public works staff in attendance who are able to assist as needed. Lindsay?
Thank you. Good evening, council. My name again is Lindsay Oswald, project manager within Department of Community Development. If you could bear with me just a moment, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, hopefully you all can see the screen. So this evening we're here to discuss stormwater code updates. This is a study session with the council. As Director Pyle stated, I'm here representing community and Toby is here on behalf of Public Works. And we will have a question session at the end of the presentation. So we'd like to go through an overview of the proposed changes, what Planning Commission's recommendation was, and then take a look at the actual PDF draft document that shows both staff proposed changes and the amendments made based on Planning Commission's recommendation, and then go ahead and open it to questions this evening. So we're here tonight because you as City Council directed staff beginning of this year, if not last year, to make administrative process changes to certain drainage adjustment applications processed through the city. We also are correcting a Scrivener error by striking the word interim in section 20.05.010 of the Sammamish Municipal Code, and in addition 3 times in 20.05.020 the Land Use Decision Type Table. Footnote number 4 has also reference to an interim comprehensive plan, which we no longer have an interim plan. We have an approved comprehensive plan at this time. We're also here to solve the problem of ensuring that neighbors and citizens are informed when a drainage adjustment is being considered. And then also to relay that Planning Commission made their recommendation on this draft code on June 17th of this year after conducting a public hearing and deliberating on the matter. So these changes being proposed are administrative process changes, and they are not surface water design regulation changes. As for a review of the drainage process, it's required by Chapter 1320 of the Sammamish Municipal Code, the surface water runoff regulations for development proposals. This review ensures that proposed projects comply with the Surface Water Design Manual and the Sammamish Addendum, and also that drainage plans reviewed by city staff during land and title process so that they can be reviewed concurrently. The land entitlement process for drainage review as it exists with large-scale entitlements, such as preliminary short subdivisions, preliminary subdivisions, and unified zone development plans, are either processed through a Type 2 or a Type 3 process. Under these types of processes, there is public noticing and comment periods. With the Type 2, there's a decision by the director, and there's an appeal to the hearing examiner. With the Type 3 process, it again has that public noticing component along with comment periods and includes a public hearing. The decision on Type 3 applications then is made by the hearing examiner, and an appeal would be to the Superior Court. This is the existing structure. So drainage review that comes in conjunction with a preliminary short subdivision, a preliminary subdivision, or a unified zone development plan would be reviewed all at the same time currently. What is a drainage adjustment? It's when an applicant requests to vary from a core requirement of the Surface Water Design Manual and the Sammamish Addendum. The applicant must propose a compensating or a comparable alternative system to what is in the Surface Water Design Manual and Sammamish Addendum. The alternate system is evaluated on safety, the environmental impact, maintenance, and a host of other factors. And the director has the discretionary decision-making of whether or not to approve the adjustment as it's requested. So let's take a look at the current process versus what we'll be proposing. The current process for drainage adjustments typically comes in as a standalone process. It occurs when it's requested by the applicant, and it's typically a Type 1 decision. That means that there's no opportunity for public noticing or comment periods, and there's no appeal opportunity either. Under the code that's been proposed, the drainage adjustment would occur during project planning and land entitlement process. If it's associated with an already existing Type 2 or Type 3 decision or application type, there's an opportunity for public noticing and comment periods and an appeal opportunity. If the drainage adjustment happens to come in outside of in conjunction with another permit type, it would then have to be processed at a standalone process through a Type 2 application. That would ensure that public noticing could occur and that a comment period would exist along with that appeal opportunity. So again, we're trying to solve a problem of how to ensure that neighbors and citizens are informed when a drainage adjustment is being considered. Oops, pardon that. As for the recommendation on this topic, staff had recommended to Planning Commission that the code changes that are outlined in Exhibit 1 of the agenda bill provided this evening be approved. Planning Commission, after hearing public comment and deliberating on the matter, recommended that the staff proposed changes be carried forward, but to also include additional language that require type 2 process for single family homes and associated appurtenances in critical drainage areas. These changes are shown in conjunction with the original changes in Exhibit 2 of tonight's agenda bill. And if you can give me just a moment, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and bring up the PDF of those code changes so we can go through those. Okay. So there's a number of sections of Sammamish Municipal Code where we've either included additional language or made some adjustments, some proposed adjustments. They're all shown in track changes in red and underlined and either stricken through. My intent this evening is to go through this section by section. If you'd prefer it in another manner, please let me know. So the first changes within this PDF document begin on page 3. And that's to section 1320.030, which is the drainage review requirements. Under subsection 3, which states an adjustment to the core requirements or special requirements contained in the surface water design manual may be proposed pursuant to the terms and conditions for drainage adjustment in the surface water design manual. Staff found it pertinent to include additional language to allow for limitations. So that is this new red text. And before I go through that, I also want to point out throughout this document, you will have seen comment bubbles. That's to highlight anywhere where staff has added to or stricken language based on the Planning Commission recommendation. Or if there was a section where after Planning Commission made their recommendation, staff felt it prudent to suggest a change for structural clarity. So A includes proposed projects subject to full or large project drainage review with the addition from Planning Commission's recommendation, which is, or any project subject to drainage review located within a critical drainage area shall not qualify for an adjustment from core requirement number 3, except that proposed project subject to full or large project drainage review not located in critical drainage area may be exempt from the core requirement if they meet the surface water design manual defined exemption criteria where less than 5,000 square feet of new plus replaced impervious surface will be created and less than 3/4 of an acre of new pervious surface will be added. Sub 2, proposed projects subject to striking full or large projects. So proposed projects subject to drainage review located within a critical drainage area may request an exemption from core requirement number 3 in accordance with SMC 1320.040. So this section, the reason it was important to strike full or large project is to ensure that any project that's located within a critical drainage area must follow this process that's being proposed in code to align with Planning Commission's recommendation. Proposed projects subject to full or large project drainage review or any project subject to drainage review located within a critical drainage area that requests a standard experimental design adjustment from any core or special requirement shall declare their intent for an adjustment with the land use application. Adjustment shall be processed as a type 2 decision in accordance with Chapter 2005 SMC. Criteria for granting an adjustment are in the city's adopted surface water design manual and city addendum, section 1.4.2, drainage adjustments. Not disclosed as part of the land use application shall be processed as a standalone type 2 decision. This language in Chapter 1320.030 is important to tie it back to Chapter 20 of Sammamish Municipal Code, which we'll be getting into here shortly. The next changes occur on page 6 of the PDF if anyone's following along, not from my screen. I'm going to jump back up here real quick. My apologies. This is to, as I had showed, 1320-040 critical drainage areas. And there was an existing 6 items under this section. Staff has added a 7th item, which states, drainage adjustment applications for projects subject to full or large project drainage review or any project subject to drainage review located within a critical drainage area shall be treated as a type 2 process in accordance with Chapter 2005 SMC. Next on page 7. So those are the changes in Chapter 13. In Chapter 19A12 under subdivisions and short subdivisions, under section 040 revisions of preliminary short subdivisions and subdivisions, we added language so that the sentence states, for the purpose of this section, substantial change includes the creation of additional lots, the elimination of open space, substantial change in access, drainage adjustment applications for projects subject to full drainage review or large project drainage review in Chapter 1310 of SMC, or changes to conditions of approval on an approved preliminary short subdivision or subdivision. The reason this is significant is because drainage review is done typically, even under our current process, concurrently with the preliminary subdivision or short subdivision review. However, if they get through preliminary approval and then determine that they need to request it, that the applicant needs to request a drainage adjustment, rather than going the type 2 process, they would have to come back in and actually amend their preliminary subdivision or preliminary short subdivision application to include cohesive review with the drainage adjustment request. Page 8 is where we start getting into Chapter 2005, which is the process. Here we've stricken the word interim for comprehensive plan. The next change is as it relates to the land use table, which is Exhibit A and is on page 11. And the changes are in the type 2 section. So based on the language that I read for Title 13 or Chapter 1320, we have added that into this table as well. So we have included the drainage adjustment applications, subject to full or large project drainage review. There's a footnote on the next page, which I will show momentarily, that just cites you back to Chapter 13 so that you get the definitions of a full or large project drainage review. So there's no question as to what that entails. If it's not already considered within another underlying project permitting process. Type 2 would also be drainage adjustment applications for any project requiring drainage review located in a critical drainage area under Chapter 1320 of the Sammamish Municipal Code, if not already considered with another underlying project. So that takes into account the further recommendation by Planning Commission for all projects in a critical drainage area. Here we'll see the footnotes and the striking of interim in that footnote 4 that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. Again, reference back to the definitions in Chapter 1310. And then that last one that I mentioned with footnote 6 has this footnote because if it is included with a subdivision or a short subdivision, then it needs to go back to 19A12-040 rather than following that type 2 process. All right, we need to go a few pages to page 17 is where the next changes exist. And this is for section of code 2005-040, which is application requirements. So the following changes is staff had gone individually through each subset. It's A through S, I want to say. I could be wrong on that. We'll get there. But of what's required to be submitted with a land use permit application. So if this is only for a standalone drainage adjustment application and it's not tied with another land use permit, then there are some sections within this section that are not necessary information. So the first being water and sewer availability is not necessary with a standalone drainage adjustment application. That's for C and D. F, proof that the lot or lots are recognized as separate lots pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 19A04 is not necessary with a standalone type 2 drainage adjustment application. Approved certificate of concurrency is not necessary with a standalone application. Or showing of on-site or community sewage systems and or Group B water or private well. So yes, it does go through S. So those are the items that are not necessary to be included with a standalone type 2 application for drainage adjustments. All right, page 19 here. There is another section, sub 2, under application requirements where additional complete application requirements apply for the following land use permits. We added section E based on Planning Commission recommendation and staff considerations. Drainage adjustment as set forth in SMC 1320-030, standalone drainage adjustment application subject to Sammamish Municipal Code 20.05020 Exhibit A. Type 2 is not allowed prior to the primary project permit process occurring. So what this is saying is that it shouldn't be used for speculation or ahead of understanding how you're going to use or propose to do something with your property. Therefore, this application should come in at the same time as you go for a reasonable use exemption or a building permit or something of that nature rather than speculation up front. Because the drainage adjustment really is dependent on how the property is being used. All right, so that is all the changes in Chapter 2005. I'm going to jump down to page 33, which is where the next change occurs. And that's to Chapter 21B 85. So the town center regulations under development standards. 21B 85040 review and appeal under subsection D. We needed to add in that if a type 2 land use decision type for a conditional use permit or permits requesting a drainage adjustment subject to full or large project drainage review and any project requiring drainage review in a critical drainage area under 1320 SMC would require the same type of processing we've been discussing this evening. So that, takes us through the changes proposed in code. Let me jump back to the PowerPoint presentation here. Oops. Thank you for your patience, Council, as we get used to this new system. All right, that concludes my presentation this evening. Staff is available for any questions you may have, and please let me know if you'd like to see any previous slides or if you'd like me to pull the code back up. I will stop sharing my screen at this time.
And Lindsay, if we could add as a follow-up, we do have a follow-up meeting queued up for the council where there'll be a public hearing and the council will consider adoption of these changes based on tonight's feedback. Can you remind the council when that is scheduled for, Lindsay?
Yes, thank you, David. I believe that is scheduled for October 19th, I believe is the date.
Very good. I see Councilmember Stewart's hand up.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry I wasn't fast enough to jot down what section you were in. I tried to raise my hand. But Mary Wichter, when she called in with some feedback, her request, if I understood it correctly, and correct me here if I'm wrong, is that she wanted to try to make the sort of the appeal process to be more of the type 2 appeal so that if a citizen wanted to raise a concern, it would go through the hearing examiner as opposed to going to court where they would have to potentially hire an attorney. So I was wondering if you could speak to that and to where it's a type 3 process, like how does that affect the public? Because I do think it's important for the public to be able to raise their concerns and not be expected to have to hire an attorney to do so.
Certainly. I will give a go at addressing your question, and then if I have any loose ends, if Director Pyle could jump in. Typically, these will, as proposed, become a type 2, which city regulation, that process is public noticing, public comment period, and then an appeal of the director's decision goes to the hearing examiner. So that's afforded to the public, to the applicant, to the city if necessary. A type 3 permit is one that has a greater review and a public hearing associated with that. And when projects have a public hearing associated with it, it's not something that the director makes the decision on. It's in city code that the hearing examiner makes that decision. And because the hearing examiner makes the decision, there's not an appealability to the hearing examiner. You need to go to the next level, which would be Superior Court through that Land Use Petition Act. I'm not trying to put any words in the commenter's mouth at all, but typically under our process, it's a type 1 for most of these drainage reviews because they're not done concurrently with a land use application that has an appeal option.
Okay.
And so as a type 1, that could still be appealed through a Land Use Petition Act, but a member of the public or whomever needs to know that that option is available, needs to know when the decision was made, and then they have 21 days from the date of that decision, and there's no public noticing whatsoever. So this is a much more transparent process, outlining what the appeal options are and what that looks like.
So, and again, we can't put words in Mary's mouth, but do you know what specific area? Because I wasn't clear when she commented exactly what she was referring to, where it sounded like she was saying that there were more areas that she wanted to see us change, and I wasn't clear on that. And I don't know if you followed her comment or if you were on for that or not.
I'm not sure if that was just for a drainage adjustment for any project wanting it across the entire city and not limited just to the critical drainage area as Planning Commission recommended. So
is there any reason why we wouldn't do it across the city, why we would only limit it to the critical areas?
My understanding is because in the critical areas is where we need to be a little more sensitive, and if there are issues that neighbors would know that we wouldn't, then they can bring that to our attention. Where we don't have mapped critical areas, staff is comfortable being able to do that review under the threshold of that 5,000 for the large scale. The large scale doesn't have to be in a critical drainage area. It's across the city just for the large scale or full project size.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll see if I can understand that more before we get to the next round. So thank you for that clarification. Appreciate that.
No problem.
So one quick comment, because I think Councilmember Stewart, you were trying to touch upon what Ms. Wichter was mentioning earlier in her public comment. I would disagree that going to the hearing examiner does not render the need for an attorney. It is actually not much different. So most people that would go to the hearing examiner level would have an attorney because it's like a courtroom in there. So just for what that's worth. I don't see any more council members' hands raised. David, you look like you have something to say.
Yeah. Can I add on to that? So out of all this, one of our main objectives is trying to make the process accessible to the public. We want to make sure that they're aware of it, that they're able to provide comment on something, and staff do learn a lot about these areas, the critical drainage areas, especially from neighbors around a project, things we didn't know. And it's really valuable to us to receive that feedback. We also wanted to try to provide the lowest level of appeal possible to an applicant or a neighbor or a concerned citizen, right? So, there are times when applicants feel that we've denied their adjustment in error, and they'd have an opportunity to file an appeal to the hearing examiner with a new single-family home, for example. My understanding is the commenter that you were referring to, Councilmember Stewart, was really after trying to get us to refine when drainage adjustment is required. And I think one of the challenges that we have with our code is that drainage review is only required when a permit is required. So we are subject to the permit exemptions that are found in our construction codes. So for clearing and grading, for example, there are many thresholds under which you could perform a project when drainage review would not be required. But if you did the same project 10 times in a year, cumulatively, that would add up to something that would require drainage review. So I think one of the things we're going to be looking at in our partner code amendments is cleaning up Title 16 as to when and how exemptions work. So that's something that's different than what we're talking about tonight, but I think that would help address what the commenter was getting at. The concern is regarding what we call weekend warriors, or people or property owners that I call nibblers, that do a little bit, frequently, that adds up to a lot. And we're going to be trying to address that with some code changes coming up here through a partner code amendment. But that's not part of the package in front of you tonight. Hope that helps clarify.
It does. And I know that you guys know Mary. I know you talk to her and meet with her frequently. She generally has really great feedback. So I, would just encourage us to make sure that, if she still has concerns, that we can understand, why we feel like we've addressed those or where that gap might be, and if we have a plan to address it in the future, because she's definitely on top of the stormwater management, and I appreciate that very much.
Councilmember Odell.
Thanks. Yes, Mary is a wealth of knowledge on these issues. She's walked me all over Tamarack, and I'm sure everybody else has been on that trip as well. I see one of the big benefits of what we're doing here as letting the neighbors have a voice in what's happening up above them. Because one of the big issues is that, as David very adequately phrased it, the nibblers, the weekend warriors who do a little bit here, a little bit there, and the next thing you know, you have a major problem. But no one knows what's going on unless you're living right next door or happen to be walking by when it's underway and observe it. So I think this is going to be a step forward for the communities that are affected by this type of issue. I am a little concerned that people will think they need legal representation when maybe they don't. But I think if that turns out to be a problem, there's a way to address that in the future as well. Thank you.
I don't see any more hands up unless anyone else has any comments for staff. Sounds like we'll see this back in October. All right, very good.
Look forward to bringing this back to you. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Council.
I gotta pull my other device up here. I was charging it so I can see what the next item is. Okay. Our next item is the 2021-2022 storm and surface water utility rate study. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Deputy Mayor. Here we'll have Public Works has a presentation on the storm and surface water utility rate study that we've been talking about. So we should have Jeff joining us and/or Audrey.
I was going to say Jeff had his hand up in the attendees list, so.
I think I'll pull him over as a panelist.
Yeah.
He's trying to figure out how to get on to be a participant.
I think Lita has to pull him over.
Lita has the power.
And it looks like she's done so. He's now a panelist, so good to go.
She's captured him and put him into the transporter.
And now I'm here.
There he is.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, council members, and City Manager. Tonight's item will be led by Audrey Starcy, our Deputy Public Works Director. This is the first of several meetings that we'll have over the course of the next probably 6 to 9 months. This is dealing with our stormwater utility rate review and update. And tonight's meeting is really just a framework and kickoff towards that process. So with that, Audrey, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff, and good evening, Council. If you'll just excuse me for a minute while I share my screen. So as Jeff alluded to, this is really just the beginning of what we hope to have multiple conversations with our planned utility rate study for the storm and surface water utility. We would like to kick off the rate study in 2021 and hope to conclude that in 2022. The goals this
Audrey, it's not up at the moment. It's not.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let's see.
Actually, Jeff, it is up on mine.
Okay. I apologize. Go ahead, Audrey.
Okay. The goals this evening are to have some feedback from council for the planned rate study, specifically council direction for our opportunity with this rate study to look at any fiscal policy items that council may wish to address. So I'll try to keep the presentation fairly brief tonight, but I'll provide a quick overview of the utility. Predominantly, most of our responsibilities revolve around the NPDES requirements. So I'll have a quick overview of that, how the utility is funded, and the why behind the rate study, followed up by hopefully a quick council discussion. So this has a lot of information on the slide. I just wanted to provide an overview of what the utility is responsible for managing. As you are all aware, we have 4 watersheds within Sammamish, over 400 facilities, over 13,000 catch basins, a lot of projects, a lot of contracts. This is nowhere near a complete list, but just a starting point, all managed by a wonderful staff. Most of our responsibilities for the utility are actually NPDES federal requirements. In the state of Washington, the EPA has delegated that authority to the Washington State Department of Ecology. And we are considered a phase 2 permittee, which as long as we are compliant with our permit, that permit essentially allows us to discharge runoff, stormwater runoff to waters of the state. So just a brief overview of the permit itself. We are in our 3rd permit cycle. With each permit cycle, which is usually 5 years, excuse me, 5 years long, each permit cycle has more and more requirements. So we're in the middle of our 2019 to 2024 permit cycle. And as you can see, there are quite a bit more requirements with this permit cycle, and anticipating that there will be many more with the next one. So this slide, the bubbles, the blue bubbles represent those NPDES requirements as I listed in the previous slide. But that's just the start of our responsibilities for the utility. We are also overseeing many comprehensive programmatic efforts, as well as numerous studies, wildlife management, dam safety compliance. And the list to the right is a very, doesn't describe all the accomplishments that the utility has completed, but it just highlights a few from the last few years. And I would like to point out, we just received excellent feedback from the Department of Ecology for our last annual report. So funding the utility, as you are aware, the primary revenue source are surface water management fees, which are collected from King County through King County property tax statements on behalf of the city twice per year. Those SWIM fees are guided by the strategies and plans which are set by council. The rate studies project revenue requirements usually for 6 to 10 years out, and typically rate studies are recommended every 3 to 5 years. So our prior rate studies, specifically the last one completed, have accomplished quite a bit. The last rate study that was done along with the 2016 comprehensive plan established fiscal policies, operating reserves, capital reserves, revised rate structure. At that point in time, we switched from the King County surface water management fee rate structure and we established equivalent service units, or ESUs. We adopted a rate credit methodology, and we implemented system development charges. So why now? As I mentioned, rate studies are typically done every 3 to 5 years. As you saw in the prior slides, we have quite a bit more requirements for our NPDES permit. We have more assets to maintain. In conjunction with new assets, we also have infrastructure that is aging that we need to start planning for to replace. We have capital projects and programs that have been prioritized through basin plans and retrofit strategies that need to have funding, and that funding needs to be formally adopted in an updated capital plan. So the goals of this rate study, again, we have an opportunity to review fiscal policies for the surface water utility. We have an opportunity to develop levels of service and the criteria behind those. We would recommend developing at least 3 levels of service for the utility to operate under. We'd like to review our operation and maintenance needs along with staffing, update our capital improvement plan, and establish revenue needs based on those levels of service. So this is a slide that shows those permit cycles and all of the great work that we've done to date with first establishing our comprehensive plan, subsequent rate studies, updating that plan, and more rate studies. You can see in the future, we have more rate studies planned as well as an update plan in 2024, 2025 for our surface water comp plan. Back to the bubbles, we've added a color this time. We would like to embark on asset management to properly manage the condition of our assets going forward, as well as, again, updating that comprehensive plan. So how we get all those bubbles to fit into these nice, tidy boxes to develop levels of service really starts with the bottom, the foundation, our NPDES requirements, updating and developing our capital plans, continue with our basin planning and comprehensive planning update, all of course, while making sure that we're maintaining in alignment with our city stormwater goals. By making sure all of those things are aligned, we can then develop those 3 levels of service and the revenue requirements that will be needed to achieve those levels of service. This is our proposed timeline. As I mentioned, we would like to kick off our rate study by first selecting a consultant in October, beginning the rate study, developing levels of service and the criteria behind that with council, presenting our analysis to council early next year with the final rate study adoption in April of 2022. With that, we would like to open up the discussion for any feedback for the planned rate study, as well as gather information on any fiscal development policy items that council wishes us to pursue.
Great, thank you. So, Councilmember Odell.
Thank you, Audrey. Nice, crisp presentation. Thank you. Very well done. Could you go back to your bubble chart for a minute?
Yes.
I like that, by the way.
Thank you. Just 1 second.
Either one of them. That's good. There's some things on here I have to ask you about. What is IDDE?
Oh, sorry about that. There's illicit discharge and detection elimination. Essentially spill prevention and response.
In other words, dumping.
Yeah.
Okay. The dam issue, do we have any dams in Sammamish, or is that refers to stormwater ponds?
We do have you are correct, actually, with both. We do have dams in Sammamish that are stormwater ponds. Anytime a pond impounds 10 acre-feet of water or more, it's considered a dam and regulated in addition to the city by the state.
Okay, thank you. I just learned something. Okay, the swim beach program, can you explain what that's all about?
We actually have, we work with the Parks Department and monitor our swimming beaches for different levels of bacteria in the summer months to make sure that those waters are safe for swimmers.
Got it. Okay, got it. Now, a couple of financial questions. Do we index the fees annually at all?
Can you clarify? I'm not quite sure. Index the fees?
For inflation.
typically when you develop capital plans and rate studies, you typically assume an escalator on those plans.
So what's behind my question is if we did index it to say consumer price index or some other appropriate index, if we could perhaps not do these every 5 years, maybe every 8 to 10 years, would that keep you?
That is always an option. Most cities lean towards every 3 to 5 years, especially with a permit cycle that is 5 years in length that changes.
Okay.
More and more recommendations. We don't know what will be in the next permit cycle yet, so that's why it's a good idea to circle back.
Okay. I'm just thinking indexing might be a way to go for this along with other city fees as well in the future. And what is the cost of the study going to be? I missed that in the agenda item.
We have not put out our RFQ yet. I would anticipate that this would run between 60 and 75,000.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Does anyone else? I don't see any other hands, but just want to cross check.
Pam has a hand up.
Oh, thank you. I don't, oh, there it is. Okay. Councilmember Stewart, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Dell, great questions. And I guess, Audrey, if I understood your answer, part of what you're suggesting is because the regulations essentially change about every 5 years, we want to kind of do a rate study after we understand what those new regulations might be, because that might alter things. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
And then the other concern, I think we definitely need to have indexing, but if I understand it correctly, most of our indexing, those indexes don't actually keep pace with the actual inflation rates that we pay for most of our construction projects. That things like the consumer price index and stuff assume a lower rate of inflation than what we actually end up paying. So probably another reason why we need to look at these things more frequently as opposed to less, unfortunately. Would that be reasonable to assume? Okay, but I like the way you're thinking, Councilmember Odell, and not to be contrary to that, but I think those are pretty good reasons to probably keep looking at this on a more frequent basis, unfortunately. Thank you.
Right, I was thinking of not so much the consumer price index, but I know there's a construction materials cost index that the Public Works uses, and maybe something like that would be more appropriate.
Yeah, if we can find one that more accurately reflects the, what is it, like 8% inflation right now on construction projects, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I get the feeling that we lose out by the lag on catching up.
Councilmember Trine?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is any consideration being taken into the city stormwater goals? So I'm going to start at a high level, right? The city stormwater goals that are in our comprehensive plan, are they taking into account climate change? In that, I think from my observation right now, and I don't have all the scientific data, and I don't think even the climate change scientists have all the data yet, but the reality is it seems like we have extreme droughts now. 3 years a while back, and we're in another one now. And then we also have these heavy storm events, whereas, my first experience in Washington was it rained 265 days out of the year, but we got the same amount of rainfall as Texas does. They just get it in 100 days. And so are we taking into consideration in our city stormwater goals and comprehensive plan climate change in the impact?
We can take a look at the goals. I need to review those, but in the last comprehensive plan that was adopted by council, one of those documents that we actually are almost completing is the retrofit study, which was actually in place initially or implemented initially to take a look at how climate change may impact our existing storm facilities.
The other thing that goes along with that is the added work that the council added to our work plan this year for what's been commonly known as E8 and E9, the technical science analysis that we'll be looking at, taking an evaluation of current and past standards, as well as an opportunity to look at the impacts and changes of climate change. And then depending upon the outcome of those analyses, regulatory changes, which may then affect our capital plan, which will then affect the rates. So it will weave into it over time.
Thanks for jumping the gun there, Jeff, and just stealing my thunder. Well played.
Oh,
so
sorry.
Because my next question was going to drive down into some of that detail, and that detail is E8 and E9 and the money that we're spending there to get the data that we need to do these capital improvement and basin plans, correct? So,
correct.
So, well, actually, and that's what you just said. So awesome. Perfect. Glad we're, good job. I think we're heading in the right direction. I would definitely be looking for then, because I think one of the things you asked is, do you concur with the stormwater rate study? What you guys are doing? Yes. Is the policy development topic should we be including? I think, you know, we need to continue to push forward on E8 and E9 to get the data. And then from that point, we can give you more feedback as to where we actually want to spend the money. Or, I mean, I think you're doing a good job, Jeff, and working with the city manager about bringing, how does this impact our budget, right?
Correct.
In connection with all the other infrastructure projects that we should or could or need to fund.
Well, one component of that, Councilmember Train, is when we finally get to adopt and update our transportation improvement plan. The stormwater elements of those capital roadway projects are eligible expenses to be a part of the stormwater utility. So in addition to the basin studies that Audrey was referring to, an element of our transportation plan can be funded in part by the storm rate utility as well. And so we'll need to take a look at that to see what the ramifications are going forward.
And when you bring that forward to us, are we going to see, is it like in percentage then? Is the rate a percentage increase? Maybe I'm kind of asking the same question that Tom Odell was asking about. Is it indexed? But I'm also looking at it as, like, would you show me if we do 3%, here's how much money we would raise. If we do 5%, it's going to be this much money. And if it's 7% or 15 or whatever that percentage is, here's the amount of money we collect for it. Here's the projects that we can do.
So I'll turn it back to Audrey, but the concept of level of service will weave that in. So Audrey, maybe you want to touch on that?
Absolutely. We would like to develop with this rate study 3 levels of service, so that base level of service would be the minimum that the city would need to operate and be in compliance with our NPDES permit. And should council choose to have some other criteria in that base level, we can go ahead and select and work with council on that. And each level of service would kind of build on top of that. So at some point you have an optimal level of service that this is the direction that council would like us to operate the utility under. But with each one of those levels of service, we'll have a very specific revenue requirement that would say very specifically, this is how much the rates would increase in order to operate at that level of service.
And then last question, who's paying the rate?
The citizens of Sammamish.
Everyone,
right?
Everyone.
Okay, I'm also a politician, but you know, I want to serve the residents.
You know, and in part, going back to Councilmember Odell's question, breaking it up into 3 to 5 year segments may better align with the needs as they unfold rather than a longer term. So this will be policy direction that the council have the opportunity, you know, to weigh in as we go forward. Is it a 3 to 5 year return period? Is it a 5 to 8 year period? And so we'll be circling back with council on those policy guidance as we evolve the program as well.
So council, before we move on here, I do need a motion to extend just before we get to 10. The only thing we have left after this is just an update on the city's reopening. So I don't anticipate it
Move to
taking.
extend to 10,
Would to extend to 10:30?
10:15. 10:15, Tom.
10:15 was the motion.
Okay.
I need a second.
Second.
Thank you. All right. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 6-0, we will extend till 10:15. Okay, Councilmember Odell.
Thanks. I want to jump on Kent's bandwagon here. And what we're seeing worldwide is the 20-year storms are now becoming 5-year storms, and the 100-year storms are now becoming 20-year storms. And we're seeing more frequent hurricanes. We're seeing wetter and harsher winters, that sort of thing. So we probably need to err on the high side in terms of some of this stuff. The other thing too is I'm glad that Jeff brought up the issue of the impact of stormwater fees on the TIP as well, because that is a major, well, not insignificant part of the capital plan for that. So thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, really quickly, because I know we want to get out of here. I do want to jump on and thank Councilmember Treen for bringing this up. And also just to reemphasize or to kind of clarify for the public is that the work that we're doing on the retrofit, right? So the work we're doing on going around the city and bringing what's already out there up to the latest standards will have a much bigger impact on anything than any new codes we put in place, right? The new codes we put in place will have a small, tiny marginal effect. So I think this is so important because we do have so many developments, you know, Tamarack being a primary one and others where these places were developed under really, really old, right? So Audrey, like you said, every 5 years we're getting these new requirements. So if something was built 25 years ago, that's 5 sets of regulations ago. So I just want people to recognize that the work we're doing on the retrofit will have a much bigger impact than anything we do on new code going forward. So, so important across the city. So thanks for that.
Great, thank you. I don't see any more hands up. So unless staff has anything to add at the last minute on this.
Nope. Look forward to bringing it before the council over the next 6 months.
Great. Audrey, thanks for your presentation. Jeff, thank you. We will move on to that final item here. Mr. City Manager, I'm going to turn this over to you. This is an update on the city's reopening.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager. City Council, your staff has been working on a reopening plan for City Hall and for the MOC that we will be presenting at a high level tonight. With the caveat that the Delta variant, as you likely are aware of, is having a significant negative impact on our community. I'll turn it over to Deputy City Manager Scott McCall, who will present this item to you tonight and discuss what we are doing and the next steps for the longer view and the implementation given the current growing issues. Scott.
Thank you, City Manager, Council. Sorry, there's a little bit of echo in here. Is that better? No?
I think if you and the city manager are in the same room, it might be helpful if Dave muted his microphone.
Yeah, anyone at City Hall probably needs some.
My microphone is not connected.
Okay. I think we're all. Whoa.
Maybe City Hall can mute. Can Lita mute her mic?
And maybe Dave, maybe muting Dave won't hurt.
All right. We're gonna try it.
Oh, it's pretty bad. Dave, can you just try to mute your microphone and see if that might assist?
Okay.
My microphone I'm using is the house one. It's turned off, and my computer does not have an activated mic on it.
Well, then how are we hearing you? However we're hearing you needs to be, that's what needs to get muted, Dave.
When I turn on the house system, you're hearing me. Otherwise, it's turned off.
Okay. Maybe if I move back a little bit, it won't echo as much.
Now Scott is muted.
Yeah, we're not hearing anything now.
Okay. Let's try it now.
Yes.
Maybe if I go out in the hallway, it'll be better. Yeah, it's off. All right. But no.
It's still echoing. I'm wondering, Scott, maybe if you don't sit in Dave's seat and use his microphone?
Let's try it out. Council, what about now? Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you with no echo.
All right.
That was better. Almost.
Almost. No.
We got an echo again.
There's a live mic somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah, we're just getting a lot of feedback. Council, if I use this mic, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine now.
Okay, let's go with this. I'm using Dave's mic for whatever reason. The rest of it's not working right, so we'll adapt as we go. So I will be quick because I know we're trying to get out of here. But like, excuse me, like Dave said, we've been working hard on our reopening plan, and I want to caveat this by saying this is a plan that can be set forth when it's safe to do so. As you all know, things have changed rapidly in terms of the COVID environment, and we're going backwards instead of forwards. So this plan is ready to be implemented when we get to a safe spot. I do want to give a quick call out to our great crew of staff that have been working on this plan. Internally, they nicknamed themselves Operation Real Pants, which I thought was a great way to signify that it's been a long time since we've all been here in the building all together. So the approach is to provide a framework for reopening, again, with the goal of making sure that everyone, our employees, their families, and the public are safe. So some quick steps for reopening. And again, this is going to get posted on externally starting tomorrow, but I wanted to brief you all first. So our first step will be City Hall opening by appointment only. So that would be for our permit center, pet licensing, passport acceptance, things like that. This would be pretty limited. This is appointments don't overlap, and a different service would be offered on different days. So what that means is we have one external person in at a time. They leave, we clean, and then the next person can come in. Step 2 would be building on that, where appointments overlap as long as we can maintain physical distancing. Step 3, we start to bring more of the staff back into the building. And again, we are going to limit the number of staff that's in the building at any one point in time with the goal of always keeping few enough employees in the building to socially distance. And step 4 would be when things get significantly better and we can actually designate walk-in service hours where the doors would be open and people could come in and get services, and staff would return to what we would consider to be the new normal. So in this, it has what to expect for in-person services when we get to that point. I'm not going to belabor this point, but I want to drop down to the milestones, because I think this is really the important part, and it really signifies what needs to happen for us to be able to consider starting to reopen. And that is 1 month of moderate or low community transmission levels per the Public Health Department. Now, you all may have been checking, hopefully you have, but right now we are in the high category and climbing for King County. So things will have to change fairly dramatically before we get to this point. I also want to note, like the city manager said, we are working with our new union partner. We are still in discussions with our union partner about how all this stuff works. But one of the requirements of the new CBA is that we provide 30 days notice when we change working conditions. And changing the schedules will be a change in working conditions. So we need to allow 30 days notice to make sure that our staff have time to make childcare arrangements and do all the things they need to do to be prepared to start coming back to the office. Additionally, for the passport office, the State Department requires 30 days notice before we reopen that service. So that's another something that we have to plan and account for. For step 2, we would need no new COVID cases for 1 month at city facilities. Now, this includes all of our facilities. And so one of the things that we are tracking here and keeping an eye on is as kids return to school, this is the opportunity now for transmission levels to start to rise even more. And so we are trying to be really cognizant of our employees that have young kids that can't get vaccinated. Some grandparents have grandkids in their lives. So we're trying to be really careful about how much exposure we're giving anyone, and which is why all of you are at home tonight, and those of us here in the building are all masked up. Step 3 would be a limited staff return to hybrid facilities, and that's once we have our conference rooms and relevant workspaces, the safety precautions are equipped for hybrid work. We're still in process of doing that. We're ordering more equipment. We're making sure that everybody has noise canceling earphones so you can have conversations over Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be and not hear the person next to you having a different conversation. And then step 4 would be getting more to a base level of returning to the building and being open for walk-ins. Now, I want to say with all of this, this does not specifically say when we will come back for in-person council meetings. I think for the time being, given the transmission levels, we're going to hold on that one. And what we've discussed internally is coming back to you and revisiting around the beginning of November to say, what does it look like and what are we feeling comfortable with? I want to note that we've been on some city manager calls for the different cities around the county, and I know the mayor has been on some mayor calls where they're discussing among our neighbor cities, and cities are closing down rather than opening up. A lot of cities are pushing their public meetings to not start till the first of the year. I think we'd like to just continue to monitor and come back to you and see what it's going to be like, but recognize that we haven't even gotten to the cold, dark weather when everybody's indoors. And usually last year around Thanksgiving and into the holidays was when things really got tight in terms of COVID cases, and we're already there now this year. So we are working with an abundance of caution to make sure that everybody is safe before we bring our employees back and start to open the doors. So with that, we have a couple minutes left, and I see Councilmember Stewart's hand raised, so please.
Go ahead, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, two quick questions, Scott. First question is, what, if anything, are we not able to offer online to the public? Because I think that's the key, right? Is we want to make sure we can continue to provide services to the public. So is there anything we aren't already providing in an online fashion?
Councilmember Stewart, I believe the only service that we cannot provide, excuse me, online is the passport service.
Okay, great. And I think that one of the things that might be helpful is if we can, kind of remind the public that here's how they can get their normal things that they would have come into City Hall for, obviously other than the passports, that they can get all that online. And then my other question is, when we say no new COVID cases for 1 month at city facilities, what do you consider city facilities? Do you consider schools to be city facilities or only city operated facilities?
These would be our facilities, City Hall, our employees, our family members of employees. I'll give you a quick example. My daughter got notified, they've been in school for 3 days, that she had potentially had an exposure from somebody else. And she's vaccinated. So I think that's the kind of thing where, everybody's got lives outside of the building, and we want to make sure that we don't have any kind of contact with someone that might have been exposed. So that's going to be our barometer to make sure that we're safe starting to bring people back.
Great. And I agree. I think we should err on the side of caution. So I just want to make sure that we sort of clarify what that means. Like, does that mean, since your daughter has a potential exposure, that would then mean you have a potential exposure? Does that count? Because it's not necessarily a case at a city facility, but it's a potential exposure. So I think it would be really important to kind of clarify that, because there are people who are in compromised positions or may live with people who are compromised. And I just want to make sure we're really clear with our, to protect our staff, and to also be clear with the public if they are going to come in, what all of this means. So I love this plan. I really appreciate it. But I think a little bit more clarity around that, I think, would be really, really great for people, especially those who are trying to err on the side of caution.
Appreciate that, Councilmember Stewart. And I will say, this is a living, a living document. And so we are certainly willing to adjust and amend as we learn more and better drill down. And the other piece I would say, and then Councilmember Odell, I want to make sure and get to you, is there's a much more detailed plan internally that we are in process of working on that will have those kinds of specifics. Councilmember Odell, please.
Hold on, before we move to Councilmember Odell. Sorry, we need to extend one more time. Maybe Councilmember Odell, you can give us another 5 minutes.
Would you extend another 5 minutes?
Second.
Okay, so we'll extend to
Aye.
21.
Aye.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, ayes have it. Councilmember Odell, go ahead.
Thank you. Two quick questions. One, are we coordinating with the sheriff's office to make sure that they're doing what we're doing?
We are in contact with the King County Sheriff's Office. And they've been, obviously, anytime we change policy, like when we reinstituted the mask mandate, they're included on that notification. So, yes.
Okay. Secondly, among our city employees, are we having anyone who's refusing to be vaccinated? Who can be?
Councilmember Odell, I don't know the answer to that because we have not asked the question. The only thing that we know about are employees that voluntarily filled out a form to say that they're vaccinated, because previously we were allowing going maskless in the building if you certify that you were vaccinated. But that policy has since changed.
What percentage of the city population did that?
Councilmember, I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can find that out.
Okay, I think we need to have a further conversation along those lines. Okay. Personal opinion. Thank you. Good job, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see, oh, no, I do.
Sorry. Councilmember Odell raised a really good point, particularly around the sheriff's office, which is, since they're in the building, if they're not following the same policies, we kind of blow it. And I would also go a step farther to say, what about Eastside Fire and Rescue? If those folks are going to be entering the building as well, or anybody from Eastside Fire and Rescue, it's my understanding that they are not requiring vaccinations And so I think that understanding how that policy plays into those who will be allowed to work in the building. And again, for clarity's sake, I think it's really important that we're just crisp and clear with people who's going to be in the building working and what it, I know we can't give out individual personal information, but that we could certainly set policies that say, you can't work in the building if you're not vaccinated or something to that effect.
Councilmember Stewart, to answer your question initially, anyone that comes into the building right now for any reason is required to be masked. That's the policy we have in place. In regards to whether or not anyone's vaccinated, that's a conversation that we continue to have. But to date, we have not required vaccinations.
What would we need to do? Would council need to debate that and pass that as a policy, or is that something that you guys can do on your own?
It's an ongoing conversation, council member, and I think that we continue to have that and discuss it internally. We will be discussing it with our union partners, and we will be tracking what's going on in the region and the state as well. I know other cities are having these same conversations, and so I think this is an ongoing conversation.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. I don't see more hands up now. So unless staff has anything else to add or council has any final questions.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, ayes have it, 6-0. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Scott.